members of the January 6th Select Committee have a message for the Justice Department under Merrick Garland. Do your job. Now, on Monday evening, the panel's members went off over the agency's inaction after making 2 more criminal referrals against former Trump aides Dan Scavino and Peter Navarro. Now, both of whom, of course, played an alleged part in the former president's failed election coup. The Department of Justice had a duty to act on this referral and others that we have sent, says Representative Adam Schiff of California. Without enforcement of congressional subpoenas, there is no oversight, and without oversight, no accountability for the former president or any other president, past president or future. Without enforcement of its lawful process, Congress ceases to be a co-equal branch of government. Other members, including Representative Zoe Lofgren, Liz Cheney, Elaine Luria, also joined, suggesting that the DOJ was abdicating their duties. Luria said, quote, "Attorney General Garland, do your job so we can do ours." So look, what is the job? What's his job? It's to carry out the law, right? Well, here we have members of Trump's inner circle that are literally in contempt of court, of Congress. They refuse to testify. They refuse to hand over documentation requested by the January 6th committee. They refuse to take this seriously. And it's because of Merrick Garland's weakness in the face of these developments, of these new developments in the panel's investigation. In fact, on top of Scavino and Navarro's referrals, the committee announced plans to sit down with Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, according to ABC News. Panel has also requested an interview with prominent right-wing activist Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, because of her personal and significant involvement in the plot to have the election brought before the Supreme Court so that her husband could rule on it. And on Monday, a federal judge ruled that it was more likely than not Trump and right-wing attorney John Eastman committed multiple felonies. The illegality of the plan was obvious, wrote Judge David O. Carter of the Central District of California. Our nation was founded on a peaceful transition of power, epitomized by George Washington laying down the sword to make way for democratic elections. Ignoring this history, President Trump vigorously campaigned for the vice president to single-handedly determine the results of the 2020 election. Add into that, we have nearly 8 hours of missing call logs on January 6th, which suggested that Trump was communicating with his allies using burner phones or back channels while the Capitol building was under attack, while people were literally in the building chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Interesting. Now, look, Trump, we know from stuff that was released to the January 6th committee that Trump spoke to Bannon twice that day. Steve Bannon, of course, along with Peter Navarro, had planned the Green Bay sweep. That was to basically with the goal of illegally keeping Donald Trump in power. Trump that day also spoke to Pence to pressure him not to certify the election. And again, all of this we know from the committee, and yet the DOJ does absolutely nothing. Just nothing. In fact, in a Monday Washington Post op-ed, columnists Greg Sargent and Paul Waldman argued this, quote, "It is hard to see how the Justice Department can tenably refrain from a full criminal investigation into whether Trump broke laws in connection with January 6th. They added not doing the investigation at all would mean the legal system doesn't even attempt to answer a fundamental question here. Whether Trump's extraordinarily corrupt effort to subvert our political order amounts to criminality to the degree that it's obviously warranted." Now, if they are indeed correct, and Merrick Garland just isn't doing an investigation at all, doesn't plan on it, well then, I mean, the rule of law is gone. And then our country, of course, follows with it. Now remember, they want to turn, the far right wants to turn this country into a fascist theocracy. I've talked about this all the time. Fundamentalist Christianity, right? To be the law of the land, essentially. you have, Donald Trump as king of the United States, punishing his political enemies by throwing them in prison, lock her up, and then making everyone else in government kiss his ass. And look, this is not an exaggeration. Donald Trump has always been about power, his own ego, and having control. The guy, went out and praised Kim Jong-un and thought, oh man, I really wish, do you see how the people have to come out and actually applaud Kim Jong-un when he walks into a room? I want that. Yeah, that's because if they don't, they get killed. They get murdered. And so, look, I don't think Donald Trump cares for what reason they cheer him when he walks into a room. He just wants them to cheer. And so this is a dangerous person, a very dangerous person, and he is supported by other very dangerous people. Again, people like Steve Bannon. And by the way, Steve Bannon, and this is something that I've been looking into, really. Steve Bannon has embraced something called Duganism. Now, I don't know if a lot of you have heard about Duganism, but basically it's a political philosophy espoused by Alexander Dugin. So Alexander Dugin is a Russian philosopher, who is seeking to create a traditionalist Christian empire rooted in conservative Orthodox Christian values and white supremacy. The guy literally wants to bring us back to the Dark Ages. Medieval. And so he's like, oh yeah, the medieval times, well, they were illiberal, and so therefore, that's what we want to go back to. We don't like Western liberal democracy. So, I mean, that's scary. Look, the Washington Post reported back in 2019 that there are clear connections between Dugin and other prominent right-wing figures in the United States. His works have been translated by Arctus Media, which proudly claims that he has served as an advisor to Vladimir Putin. He shares ties to Richard Spencer, white nationalist, and his wife, Nina Koprianova, who has translated some of Dugin's works into English. Additionally, there are connections between Dugin and David Duke, well-known racist, Milo Yiannopoulos, Stephen Miller, who was high up in Trump's administration, and even Trump himself. Again, they are against Western liberal democracy. And so, look, let me ask you, if you think that our very form of government is the enemy, well, then why would it matter if you break laws in order to try to usher that in, to get a form of government you want? And and I say that because it's Steve Bannon who was pushing this. Steve Bannon, along with Dugin, along with many on the far extremist right that believe in this. Now, understand that what January 6th wasn't just a riot. That was a part of it. Understandably, people focus on this, right? What it was, in reality, was a pretty big effort to try to end the United States Western democracy. I mean, again, you had hundreds of people. You had Republican congressmen that were trying not to certify the election. You had fake electors in many different states. You had right-wing media figures. You had Giuliani and others that are launching court challenges on the election, all in order to pressure Mike Pence and Republicans to overturn the results of an election and to reinstall Donald Trump as president of the United States. That's it. And so that's what it was. Now, if Merrick Garland either refuses to see this as the threat of which it is, right? And look, the reason I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt of not realizing this is because the government has failed in so many different accounts, so many different times, to recognize the far right as a threat. And of course, you can go and you can blame For example, in January 6th, you can blame the FBI for not acting on actual intelligence, saying that there's going to be violence on January 6th. They ignored it because, well, it's the right wing. Oh, they're never going to do violence. No, we're actually worried about Antifa, and we're worried about Black Lives Matter. That's the real problem. No. They constantly and consistently ignore right-wing authoritarian movements in this country. And so either Merrick Garland is continuing that sad tradition of underestimating the far right, or worse, is either scared or complicit in not going after, members of, the group that tried to overthrow the election and our democracy on January 6th. Then, well, I mean, look, if he doesn't do something, right, and actually go after people for the crimes committed, the conspiracy to defraud the American people, for Trump, for obstruction of justice and everything else, well, then the country's basically over. We've got no laws left. And so I agree with the January 6th Commission in saying, Merrick Garland, either do your goddamn job or get the fuck out.